Today's episode of DRL is brought to you by Hella Cocktail Company. My guests don't just come to DRL for me. They also come for the cocktails. Luckily, my friends at Hella Cocktail Company have my back. These guys make amazing mixes, from Bloody Mary to Margarita to Moscow Mule. They also make cocktail bitters, my secret ingredient, and now yours too. It's easy to feel like the best bartender in town when every bottle comes with a simple recipe on it. Hella Cocktail Company, bold flavor, real ingredients, hospitality. Mixing it up since 2011. Shop the collection on Amazon Prime or use code DRL online at hellacocktail.co for free shipping. Hello, my lovely listeners. Welcome back to another episode of DRL, where we're talking everything dating, relationships, and love. I'm your host, Tennesha Wood. Today, I'm back with the boyfriend, Chris. Hey, babe.
Hey, what's cracking?
How you doing?
I'm good.
It's been a while.
Yeah. I mean, well, we talk every day, pandemic, lockdown, all that, but been a while for the podcast.
Yeah. How you been?
Been living, trying to stay healthy. Lost 20 pounds.
Whoop, whoop.
Eating right.
That is a good result of quarantine, is that we've just really been able to get back into a good routine, like a daily workout, eat right, all that. So I actually had something I wanted to talk to you about. So last night I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were talking about her relationship with her father. So her parents are older. They're like in their 80s, and they haven't been together for some time. And so as a child, her father left, went out of the country. And, she sort of felt like he really didn't give her all she needed. As a father, he was sort of in and out of the picture. Her mom always really encouraged her to maintain a relationship with him. And so she would go see him. They would end up, getting in fights and rehashing everything that happened. And at a certain point in her life, she didn't really see the value of a relationship with him because she felt like it mostly just triggered her. And it wasn't giving her what she needed from a father. So she luckily was able to find that sort of relationship in other family members. But she just, over the years, realized as she was healing herself that this wasn't good for her, and it just was constantly bringing her back to that childlike space of like frustration and anger, and knowing that she couldn't fix him and make him what she wanted out of a father. So anyway, she's talking to me about the fact that her mom really wants her to now try to forge a relationship with him in his older age, and she...
In his mid-80s.
In his mid-80s.
Okay.
And for her, she doesn't see a value in it. And so as she was telling me about this, I was thinking about the fact that like we have so many different sorts of relationships in our lives, right? Everything is a relationship. The relationship that you have with the barista at Starbucks is a relationship. You go in there every day. She knows your order. She says good morning. She makes your coffee. There's like a friendly exchange and a casual relationship there. So anyway, what I was saying to her was, I wonder if it's possible to forge a new relationship, one that isn't where she is expecting a father figure out of him, one where it's just a casual relationship where they could talk about, sports, the weather, etc., and maybe like get to know him. I think coming into the situation as this is my father is really what is causing the frustration, whereas she just came into the relationship and thought, this is a person and I'll get to know this person as a person, not as my father. Then I think it's possible to forge a new relationship. But, I think she continues to maybe frustrate herself by expecting this father figure.
There's a couple things here that are probably really kind of difficult to understand and contextualize unless you've been in this situation. You mentioned like the casual relationship that you might have with like a barista at Starbucks, or, the security guard at your office, or the doorman at your building, whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, these people, you're meeting them at intersections that are mutually beneficial, right? So you're going to Starbucks for something that you want. they're going to Starbucks for something that they need. And there's a mutual benefit that you're all taking from that brings you to that intersection. Whereas in this, what I would consider an artificial exchange, you're not meeting anywhere of value for anyone. I always think in terms of like numbers and economics. It reminds me of a quote from Adam Smith, love him or hate him. He's said some interesting things about economics. And he goes, "It's not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own self-interest. We address ourselves not to their humanity, but to their self-love, and never talk to them of our own necessities, but of their advantages." And what he's saying there is no one ever goes into the butcher shop and says, hey, I need meat because I'm going to take this meat, I'm going to cook it, and it's going to be the thing that, feeds my family. What you do is you go in there and you say, I have this money. What are you going to give me for this money that's going to get you this money right now and get you this money in the future? And so there's a reason for you to meet. And so the cordiality just happens to be from the idea and the concept that over time, that type of relationship will also have additional benefits of, it could be busy. You could give someone a signal while you're in the back of a long line. Go over to the side. They make your coffee or your whatever, bring it over to you on the side of the whole line. And then you just give them whatever and be like, thanks, appreciate that, keep the change. That's like way down the line of that relationship. All those little cordial interactions generated something additional, right? But it's all self-interest. So my thing that I'd posit to people who question whether or not someone should make that effort is, why? Why am I here? Why are you here? Don't come to me with your necessities. Come to me with my advantages. Don't tell me you need this meat to feed your family. Show me you got the money to buy it. That doesn't exist here. And I think people fail to realize that when they're not in the situation.
What doesn't exist here?
The mutual self-interest. Like there's no benefit for one party to be at that intersection and to artificially create that. Like you wouldn't go into a store where you don't want anything and create a relationship. But
the thing is, you never know. So when I lived in New York, that were from New York, people constantly told me, I could just tell you're not from here. And I'm like, how can you tell? And they say, well, because you actually talk to strangers. And part of the reason I do that is simply because you never know. Like literally one day last summer, I was sitting in a coffee shop editing. This woman asked if she could use the outlet that I had my computer in. I say, yeah. We get to talking. It turns out she's trying to start a podcast. We end up having this whole conversation. I tell her about this like podcast fellowship that I was doing at the time. And now we have a relationship. It's a very casual relationship, but there is a relationship and there is some benefit for both me and her. Now, did I go into that coffee shop that day thinking, I really need to meet somebody. I really need to talk about podcasts. I really need another person who, is also doing this that I can form a friendship with. No, absolutely not. But what I'm saying is you never know what can come out of a relationship when given the chance to be a relationship and to forge that.
I hear what you're saying, and that makes sense. But just like matter cannot be created or destroyed, it can only change forms. Serendipity, which is what you're describing, and chemistry or spark or whatever you want to call it, which you're describing, commensurate to the type of relationship that you've built, those things neither can be created nor destroyed either. So you can't sort of replace serendipity with an artificial construct of forcing people to come together. There's nothing serendipitous about an estranged child meeting up with their elderly parent, right, who's been estranged as well, right? So there's nothing serendipitous about that. And the fact that the opportunity for chemistry and spark, which generally happens in the beginning, has already been squandered. Every single thing about trying to replicate that relationship is already artificial. You're two strikes from the beginning. And so the potential upside, when you think about how you go into everything in your life every day, days are busy. It's a struggle. You need to survive. Every decision you make is a calculated one in terms of like, is this a good use of my time? Because that's the one thing I can never get back. And people don't go and just like go down the rabbit holes of 2 strikes. You just don't.
But that's what I'm saying, is not recreating that relationship. That's my whole point. You shouldn't go into a relationship like that thinking, I'm going to make this person who I wanted them to be then now. Like you can't do that. That's not going to work, and it's not going to happen. You can't go home again. It's just never going to be the same. But what I'm suggesting is forming a new relationship that doesn't include that old relationship. Do you think that's possible?
Not really. Not in any way that's actually significant. Not after this much time. You've never gone that far to create a relationship with that limited upside. It always happens with no effort. Just like you said, you were in a coffee shop, not expecting to meet anyone, not expecting to talk to anyone, but you did. It just happened. That was an effort that was worth what could come out of it at a minimum, or it could be your best friend. But the risk reward, the effort for the outcome was skewed heavily in your favor. To do all the things that it would take, all the things it would overcome, all the transformation in your mind of what that's supposed to mean to you when you interact with this person, and like possibly going a great physical distance or doing whatever, for the potential upside, that's probably the minimum or mid-range of something that you might casually invest in serendipitously at a coffee shop. It's not the same risk-reward profile. It's not the same effort for outcome. And so there's really no point.
And I'm also not discounting the fact that this person has caused a great deal of harm and pain in her life, and she's had to work through that. You know, she's had to have her own struggles because of that and figure out how to work through them to now be in the good place that she is. So I'm certainly not discounting everything that was done, but I guess because it's closer to the end of his life, I wouldn't want her to have a moment of regret about it. Like, I wouldn't want her to be sitting with her child and thinking, man, I wish she would have known him, or man, I wish, you know, I would have talked to him, or I would have asked him this. Like, I think regret is probably the worst emotion, because regret is the feeling that there was something that you could have done or should have done and didn't do.
Regret kind of goes against everything that I think the way the universe works, right? So it's like, if you're regretting something, not only are you trying to drive forward by looking in the rearview mirror, which is like very dangerous, you're focused on the wrong time, right? You should be focused on now. And so in terms of everything that I believe in, regret is kind of like not really a thing.
So if everything that you're saying is true about the effort versus the reward and all that, does that mean that forgiveness is not actually possible?
That's not true. You can forgive someone and be done with it.
That's true.
It's something you've said many times.
That's true.
It's like I can forgive someone for real and just I don't mess with them no more.
Right.
And I mean, I've literally heard that on you.
I have said that. Yeah. I have said that.
I know you think I don't listen, but I be low-key listening.
But I also think, you know, one of the things that I personally have had to work through and continue to work through is forgiving people. Part of the reason that I think for me, I have to let people go when I forgive them is because, and I hate to admit this, but it's probably because I haven't fully forgiven.
Right. That's what I was about to say.
You know, so
I think people don't understand what forgiveness really is.
Yeah. So in your version of forgiveness, is it possible to forgive and forge a new relationship with that person?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But let me take one step back first to the regret thing. So the regret thing to me is, you know, the reason why I don't really believe it, that you should engage in it, is because you should generally be detached from the outcomes of things, right? And we've talked about this and we've read about it, you know, Deepak Chopra and different things. And that doesn't mean indifferent or like callous. It just means that you should go for the things that you want to go for, like putting it out there, trying to manifest it. But at the same time, you have to detach yourself from the outcome. Now, the real reason why this could feel like a regret on a logical basis is because you're saying, well, that level of detachment at this point is now callous and hurtful, right? It could feel weaponized and targeted, like, oh, this person's at the end of their life. Being sort of detached from the outcome or having an analytical approach to like effort versus outcome is mean-spirited or something of that nature. But at the end of the day, if you want to think about what was mean-natured, was having not a healthy detachment at the time of the departure or the time of the sort of, summertime and holiday visits. That wasn't a healthy detachment. That was actually a callous, hurtful mechanism. And so it's very similar to the things that we're kind of observing right now in the sort of black-white divide that's happening in the country. They want to make you forgive them for the way they want to apologize. So it's like someone is going to say, well, here's how I'm apologizing, so you need to forgive me. And it's like, well, I'm not even going to start to tell you because I just don't even have the energy right now that 5 of the 10 things that were part of your apology are also problematic.
Right.
And so I don't owe you the explanation or the energy for you to fix those next 5 things. Good kudos on the first 5, but you came with 10 things, and now I'm disengaging because it's not my job to allow you to perfect your apology, right, for my forgiveness. You can come to me correct, and I can forgive you. Now, whether or not I continue to put energy in that relationship is totally my own choice. Like, if you really want forgiveness, you have to actually also be detached from the outcome. You have to also say, I really want forgiveness, but I know that could come with absolution on the relationship, an absolute close. And if you're not happy with forgiveness and absolute close, you don't really want it for the right reasons. Mm-hmm. And if you're not willing to give it under the understanding that the opposite, that it could be a reforging of the relationship, if that happens, then you're not willing to give it. Everybody has to be meeting at the fulcrum point of forgiveness for it to work. And any deviation from what it's really about on either side, it doesn't work. So if he has the best idea about what the outcomes could be and is really focused on that forgiveness, and she's not ready to give it because she's not even willing to accept that it could actually create a spark, mm-hmm. a serendipitous spark, like a genuine one,
right,
where everyone's just focused on forgiveness and she could remount the relationship, then she's not ready to receive it and it'll never work.
So they have to be on the same plane at the same time.
But not on the same plane. It's actually different planes, but on the same wavelength. Mm-hmm. They're both actually seeking forgiveness from their mutual sides in the right spirit. But that could end in either outcome for the future of the relationship.
All that you're saying comes with everything from the past, right? So they have to build up to this place based on everything that's been in the past. Whereas in the example that I talked about, the serendipitous example of the woman in the coffee shop, there was no judgment of a past, It mm-hmm. was literally, in this moment, I like this woman and me and this woman have a connection. I don't know anything about her past. I didn't know what she did. I don't know how she treats her other friends. It literally was just in this moment. And that's what I'm wondering if is even possible to create, where we let go of everything that had happened. We let go of that history and we start today. So today, I don't know you as my dad who hurt me, who wasn't there for me. You're just a man sitting in front of me at a coffee shop. Can we start there? Is that possible?
I mean, look, I hate to keep bringing up Deepak Chopra, but one of the other main tenets of the things he says that's congruent with everything that I'm saying is to not be in judgment, right? To not judge anything in that way. And mm-hmm. so in order to even be at the place where everyone's coming from the same wavelength on the forgiveness tip, you would have to relinquish all of that judgment that you put on everything in the first place. Right. And so, and it's not because you're looking back, it's because in every moment you're trying to be a better version of yourself, right? You're trying to improve. And so by default, you have to get rid of the judgment. But that doesn't mean that who you are right now and who you're trying to become aren't partially informed by the past.
Right.
And so it's a struggle between relinquishing the parts that you don't want and building up the parts that you do without focusing on the actual past, right? And that's not easy. Most people live and die and don't even start that process.
Right.
And so, it's just a tough thing to do.
Especially with a parent. You only get that once. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like you only get that with two people one time that are your actual, birth biological parents. But it also brings me to another friend of mine who a couple years ago essentially told me that he was breaking up with his father. He said that he's treating me, and this was in his adult life, he's treating me in a very disrespectful way, in a way that I wouldn't allow anybody else to treat me. So I'm done with him. And I remembered saying to that friend, I was like, you can't just be done with your dad. Like I literally said that to him. He said, I wouldn't allow you to treat me like this. I wouldn't allow any other friend to treat me like this. I wouldn't allow any other person to treat me like this, particularly one who says they love me. So why would I allow him to treat me like this? Because he has the label of my father. And it blew my mind at the time because my defense to him, the only thing I kept saying was, you can't just do that to your dad. I didn't have a defense because truthfully, if he had come to me and said, I have a friend that's treating me in a disrespectful manner, my advice would have been, maybe that's not a friend you need in your life, But because it was his dad, I didn't want him to let go of that. But at the end of the day, I think I have come to a place now where I don't think anybody is allowed to treat you in a disrespectful manner or in the way that belittles you as a person in any way, even if it is your parent. And that's a hard one to come to. The friend I was talking to last night, I also, gave her that piece of advice. Like no one is allowed to treat you in a way that is disparaging to you. And so I get that.
To me, in situations like this, it's always good to think about where things are trending, right? And so what someone's done is not the end of their story. Where someone's been is also not the end of their story. Where they're going is a big part of it. And so you could have done terrible things. You could be in a terrible state. But where are you trending? And is that trending based on self-awareness and sort of like a active, sort of struggle towards the direction that you want to go, right? And in science, they have this thing. It's called Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. So you can't at the same time tell these three things. Exactly the quantities of something, the speed at which it's going, and the direction in which it's going. You can only know two certainly. And so it doesn't always matter how fast it's going, but you do need to know what you're dealing with and which direction it's going. You can't know all three. And trying to know the third thing about how fast something is getting to that point will distract you from the two things you can know, what it is and which direction it's going. So in the case of that man's father, if he knows what he's dealing with and he knows the direction it's going, like there hasn't been a self-awareness to change the direction of that, regardless of the speed, it don't matter. It's not going in the right direction. And he's entitled to withdraw from that situation. Frankly, you're entitled to withdraw from the situation regardless.
That's a really great way to think about it. The fact of you can see the direction of something and you just know where it's going to go based on the fact that it's going in that direction. And you don't have to wait to say, well, is it coming to hit me yet? Is it about to hit me yet? Because you know it's coming in your direction. Right.
And it might not be moving fast. It's like that Austin Powers movie, right, where he's in the forklift and he's like, no, and he puts his hands up and then like it looks like the forklift's coming right at him, but then you see it from the side view and it's super far away and going really slow.
So I didn't watch a lot of movies, so I have no idea what you're talking about.
This is for the listeners. We'll watch it after this. But I mean, it's like he's like, oh my God. And then when you see the camera angle from his view, it's like it's coming right at him. But then when you see it from the side view, it's super far and it's moving like at a snail's pace. Again, the speed doesn't matter. You know that it's something that can hurt you and it's coming in your direction. And at the time, that's all that matters. And so to me, in this particular situation, like the boundary at which you need to say is, because it's a person, right, and their behavior, are they self-aware? That's the number one step. If they're not even self-aware, then you don't even have to calculate nothing.
Because you're going to be wasting your breath trying to get them to see the first thing.
You can give them some tools to try to understand that they need to explore self-awareness. But if they're not self-aware, you don't need to calculate nothing. You don't need to chart nothing. You don't need no science, right? But if they are self-aware, then you got to say, okay, are they pointing in the right direction? And is what I'm dealing with along that plot of that line moving towards what I want to deal with?
For me personally, I did have a close relationship with my father. And so I often will compare the relationships and think to myself, well, I can't imagine just, dropping my dad, or I can't imagine if he's, 80 something and we just don't have a relationship. But that's also because I'm coming from a place of, I can't imagine this man who was so great to me being anything other than that. And so it is unfair for me to come from that position and then say, but it's your dad. But it wasn't your dad for you. You know what I'm saying? This was a man who was maybe in and out and didn't give you the thing. So he was just another person that disappointed you.
And at the end of the day, I think that, like I said, everything that you're saying makes sense. Coming from where you're coming from. And a lot of it is perspective. And so for example, in my own situation, right, just working backwards, like a few years ago, one of my best friends and former business partner, his father passed. Mm-hmm. And you were with me at the celebration of life. That's what they wanted to make sure everyone called it. And I think that's the right thing to say. I was like taken, and I felt overwhelmed with emotion like my own dad died. Because I remember when I met this person, like almost 20 years ago now, and just seeing how him and his brother talked about their dad. Like sometimes I'd leave from hearing them talk about it and cry. Mm-hmm. I didn't know why I was crying. I was just happy. I was happy for them. Like, this is dope. And so over the years, and then having a chance to meet with him myself, and we interacted in different ways, sometimes great, sometimes bad. It was funny. It was kind of like I was like another son. Because we'd get into this back and forth intellectual battles, and I felt like I was talking to like a father figure. When he passed away, I was like, wow. Like Bill Cosby never did that for me on the Cosby Show, right? And he did that for a lot of people, and that's great. And I thought it was cool, but it was okay. And I always had my grandfather, right? Mm-hmm. He was my Cosby Show guy,
right?
He wasn't a doctor, he might have had his ways. He definitely had his ways. But, it was cool because he was my...
But he was that for
He was my pop.
Yeah.
But I also didn't expect him to be my dad. I knew I had a dad. And, people say, oh, well, how could you treat your dad like that? I was like, I actually didn't treat him anyway. Like, if I see my dad, and I see him all the time, I run into him all the time, I have no beef.
So just to give some background, your relationship with your father is very casual. It's not one where you never talk to him, but I wouldn't consider you guys as having a relationship. It is more like I see him at Starbucks sometimes. I say, hey, what's up? How you doing? And keep it pushing. So it's very casual. But at this point, would you even consider any other form of a relationship with him, provided he came to the table correctly?
Absolutely. I'm not opposed to it. So that's the thing. Like, people think oh, it's really unfair you treat your father. I'm like, look, we maybe had better attempts at trying to forge that when I was 4 or 5 or 6. And then he just lived other places. You know what I mean? He kind of was, he might have been in the city. He might have moved. He might have been in Colorado. I don't actually know all the places he was, but and then, when I went to boarding school, he was kind of around. Like, some of my friends tell me that they worked with him and that he was cool. I was like, great.
Hey, your dad's cool. Cool. I didn't know that, but okay.
Right. I mean, I always knew that. People always tell me, oh, you're Quan's son, whatever. Like, he's a great guy. And I was like, oh, that's amazing. I was like, that. Like,
did that piss you off when people would say, oh,
no.
He's a great guy? Because in your mind, were you like, to you, maybe?
No, I always knew it. No one's ever said anything different. And it didn't bother me because I was like, that's great. Like, I'm good. Like, it never bothered me for a split second.
But it didn't bother you in terms of like, so I'm glad he's so great to you when y'all are working on the job together, but I wish he would be great to me as a father.
No,
that never crossed your mind.
I didn't have that thoughts, at that time for sure. And because I didn't need anything. What did I need specifically? In my mind, I didn't need anything. I was good. I was like, I'm succeeding at everything that I ever attempt.
Right.
Right. And like my mom is dope. My grandparents are great. I have aunts and uncles. They were great. And I had amazing friends. Like, I didn't need anything.
I mean, okay, I work with single women every day, right? And most of them are successful. So they have a great job. A lot of them have close-knit relationships with their friends and family. Mm-hmm. A lot of them are doing well financially. So they would say, I have everything I need. There's nothing there that's missing that they need to survive, to thrive, and to have a good life, right? But they do come to me because they're like, I do feel like the love of a partner is what is missing, is what I need to complete the picture. Yeah, I'm fine without it, obviously, but it does feel like there's a void there because that's the thing that I want. So for you, yes, you had your mom, your grandparents, family, friends, you were doing well, you were thriving and at everything you were doing, but did it ever feel like there's something missing there?
No, and here's why. So like, even like when I was in college and like I went to celebrate my late grandfather, my dad's birthday. And they ended up surprising me with the birthday party and everyone got together in Maryland and he was there. We had a great time. We had some drinks, had a great time. And I was cool. And then I didn't really think about it.
Now, at no point in that interaction with him did you think like, there's this elephant in the room. He wasn't there. I need to get this off my chest. Because I think that's how I would be. You know what I'm saying?
Not for a split second.
Like, you know me, if something has happened that has caused some sort of rift, I'm like, I can't just sit in a room with you and act like nothing's happened and just buddy with you now. Like, we need to solve what had happened before I could just sit here casually with you.
I had already forgiven the whole thing. I didn't have any attachment to the concept because I had actually truly forgiven, like way back. I had just been like, look, I get it. You were like a teenager when I was born. You weren't able to do what I'm doing now, but you not being able to do what you're doing now, which is the statistical probability, what I'm doing is a statistical probability, pushed me to know what to do. How was I going to be mad about that when it put me in a position to be like the best dad I could be in my mind, and then also later reciprocated back to me as it was dope, right? So like, how am I going to be mad about that? And I don't have no beef with the person specifically. So, but now I'm a grown man. Like, what do I need? If he stepped to me and was like, bro, listen, we got to see each other more. Like, look, this is where I'm at with it, X, Y, Z, whatever, however it feels to him, mm-hmm. right? Where that veil of that barrier of self-awareness is breached and then he's trending in the right direction. Whatever that means to him and however he expresses it to me, if it's real, I'm open to the idea that could create a spark that reestablish a relationship. I'm also open to the idea that I could say, look, bro, I know we might not have had this conversation, but like, I'm not mad. I'm not upset. You don't have to feel like you're not forgiven by me. Mm-hmm. Be like, and this is great and I appreciate it, but it didn't give me the spark to say like, I want to hang out with you all the time. Like, I'm happy with it either way. And I don't know where it's going to be until that happens. But it's not my problem to fix.
Oh, it's not.
And the reason
it's sort of like the racism in America right now, where it's like, it's not the problem of black people to fix because it's not the problem they created.
Right.
Like not their problem. They're the victims of what was created, but we are not the problem.
So we say like, look, in a logical and fair world, it's not our problem to fix, so we don't have to try to fix it. But because it continues to oppress us, we have to keep the heat up to push the people to fix it.
Right.
Key difference, I am not being continually oppressed by this situation, so I don't have to keep the heat up to push that person to fix it.
Right.
Plus, the time that it needs to be fixed, remember, this is about a lifetime, right? Racism needs to end forever. A father-son or father-daughter relationship or mother
right.
know, relationship, it's over a finite period of time, and it's less for them because they're already 20 to 40 years old, right? Whatever, when you're born,
right.
roughly. And so, I don't need to fix my relationship with my father. She doesn't need to fix a relationship with her father for future generations.
But maybe.
No, not in their 80s.
But if you think about it, like single parent households produce single parent households. These things go through generations. So perhaps if these relationships are repaired during the lifetime, it can spark a difference in future generations. I mean, statistically,
maybe
people from a single parent household are more likely to then get into a single parent household situation, and it can keep going.
A lot of that is driven by socioeconomics, but maybe. My gut tells me, and I'd have to do some work to extrapolate this, which I'm pretty sure I could do if I had the time and the effort, is that it's very low probability that that's going to be the case unless it's happening shortly after, right? The incidents. The infractions, if you would, right? Like if people are waking up 5 years later and fixing things before you can really establish that you're not needed anymore, right? Because the imprint that you need to make, the structure that you need to create, it has to happen earlier, right? There's an imprint that shapes things. And so if you're not there for that, right? And it can start from the beginning. It could start from 5. It could start from 10. But at some point, it's diminishing returns. So if you're not there for that, like you can't recreate it. There's nothing that can be recreated. I am who I am. The role was missed.
Have you and your father ever had any conversation like this? Like, have you ever gone to him, whether as a child, teenager, or as an adult, and said, I was hurt by that, or you weren't there for me? Like, have you ever confronted him in any sort of way about this?
I was only hurt by it one time. And that was because, like all young men who are like 4 or 5 or 6 or however old I was, you do want the approval or like to not please, but make someone proud for whatever. And it was just some random incident where like I wanted to wear like my button fly jeans because I felt like that was like a more big boy thing to do for a weekend that I was going to spend with him. It was going to be great. And we were going to, I guess, go out in a canoe or something. And for whatever reason, maybe I was nervous, maybe I was just clumsy at the time, but like sometimes I get nervous when I'm around new people. I've done it, or awkward, and I couldn't button my button fly thing. And he came for me for it. And I was just so like, damn. That was the only time I've really ever been disappointed. Nothing else bothered me, period. A lot of things do depend on when people come into your life, right? Like one of the things you started to say earlier was someone who might be, looking to add a relationship. They have everything going that they want. They want to add a relationship. When do people usually add relationships in their life of that sort? 20 to 40, roughly, right? And then maybe a second chance at it
right.
later. And so it's perfectly appropriate at that time. And it's generally contextualized by people trying to accomplish certain things beforehand or trying to bring the relationship first and then accomplish those things, right? The context that we were originally discussing it was like, well, if someone can have all those things going and then say, I still want to bring in a romantic relationship, why can't someone have those things going and say, I want to bring in the, son, father, or daughter, father relationship? It's because that's not how that works. you don't swipe for a dad, right? Nobody goes out in their 20s and is like, oh, I just struck it big at Silicon Valley. I'm 26 years old. Let me go find a dad. Like that ship sailed, bro. Like you could have a relationship with a guy who is your father.
But you know what I think? I think we do search for that subconsciously. You might not go on Tinder and you're swiping like, I'm looking for a dad, but you're certainly looking at people and thinking, could this be a good father? And whether we recognize it or not, psychologically, I think we're always trying to fill those roles.
That's a theory. I don't think that applies to everyone, but it could apply to a lot of people for sure. I've seen studies and discussions and talking about people needing to fill those roles. Freud talked about it a lot.
And people fill them in different ways. So it might not be, in this romantic relationship, I'm looking for somebody like the father I didn't have. It could be, I am at work and I'm working my butt off because I want to be able to have the things my father didn't give me. Mm-hmm. And I do think it always goes back to that parent-child relationship. And if you didn't have it in the way that you wanted to, you're filling it or trying to find it in many areas of your life because of the way that bond is. You're never fully fulfilled without it. And but listen, I know that's like a polarizing thing to say. And I'm not suggesting that you're not a full person without that relationship. That's not my suggestion. I'm simply suggesting that it's the same as if you were born without the use of your hand, you would do other things to substitute that would give you the similar or same results. So whether that be, I'm now getting a prosthetic hand, I'm learning to use my feet instead of my hand, whatever way you would naturally, because this is such a big part of who you are and something that you need, you find a way to substitute that. And so I think it's the same when we're missing certain parental bonds or relationships where we'll find a way to substitute that, whether that be with something or someone.
I 100% agree with what you're saying, with the caveat that it's a different magnitude for everyone. Many people are not predisposed to missing the thing that they never had. Many people are not predisposed to lamenting about what could have been. They just deal and do, right? And so, like you said about the hand thing, like I know someone who has very limited use of like not just a hand, but like a whole side of their body. They hoop, they do everything, they make it happen, but they didn't redefine their whole life because of it emotionally, right? Or the way they think. And so for them, they would be like, well, I'm not going to let the tail wag the dog here, right? And so for some people, that lack of that relationship, especially if they never had it in that way, yeah, they might feel it to a certain degree, but it's not going to shape their whole life, right? It's not going to shape how they deal with other people. It's not going to shape all these things. It could be like a very small thing, right? An order of magnitude. And like for them, they'd say, it's the tail wagging the dog if you think the opposite. And so like it just really depends on the person, who they are, who's been around them, their context is just very much variable, right? And so this whole idea of this Oedipus complex, right? This whole concept of like conquering and doing better, and then like being the person who your mother would choose, and all those different things, and then the Freudian concepts about father-son relationships. They're not absolute, right? There's a lot of other guesses the same people had that were wrong. And then I think B, in the context of today, where, for a variety of reasons, this is disproportionately now impacting the Black community more and more since the 60s. And it's not even a point of going through why that is. It's just happening. That frame of mind is not built for the context of Black American men who are overcoming, despite. Because to be like a Black man in this country today who's overcoming at every step, to then like get to a point where that's now the overwhelming thing that's defining who you are and how you act, it's so insulting to even think that. Could someone like still do those things and be afflicted by this in a major way? Yes. But the probability of it is super low.
And I'm not suggesting that it takes over one's life to the point where, you know, they are unable to function. That's not my suggestion. My suggestion is that it's such a central relationship that even if we're not thinking about it consciously, in our subconscious and unconsciously, we are doing things, creating goals, changing things as a result of that lack of a relationship.
That's true. And so, for example, like the friend who I mentioned whose father passed, and it really overwhelmed me. You know, so like I said, at the time, at that one disappointment and thereafter, I didn't have any of those thoughts like, oh, I wish I had this or I wish I had that. For a very brief period of time, when I saw the interaction of this man and his brother with their father, I was like, man, I wish I had that. But not in the same way that you might think. I thought to myself, like, I see what I've accomplished now, and then I'm saying, man, if I would have had that for 25 years, I'd be crushing it. So it wasn't more like a filling a hole. It was more of a sort of like, man, I could have accomplished more. Because that type of feeling, just even seeing it and being near it and seeing the impact it had on them, increased me from that time until the 15 years later when the man passed away from afar. And I've definitely seen the impact it's had on them. So from that perspective, I would want to create that augmentation with my own children, which is something I instinctively knew by not having that augmentation. But I don't think not having it takes anything away from you. You can still be great.
Oh, 100%.
No, I know, but like you could still be great, and it's not like you're missing something. It doesn't feel like you're missing something, but you'll eventually realize that it could have augmented what you were doing, but you can't. It only bothers you if you lament about it, or if they continue to cause problems for you. If it continues to intersect with you and bother you, like the man you talked about who was breaking up with his dad, I guess is the way you put it. It was continuing to bother him, so he had to make that choice. And it was going to bring him down. Whereas me and many other people, it's not even an issue because it's no longer present.
Right.
And so it won't be something unless I lamented about it, especially after having experienced watching it later, it won't affect me.
And the other thing I was going to say is you were saying in viewing the relationship that your friend had with his dad and just how that helped you to see what having a father figure might have done for you and how far it might have brought you. Maybe not having it is what brought you far. You know, maybe not having it is what made you work as hard as you did and be as dedicated as you are and put in all the hours that you did. Perhaps if you'd had that, you'd have been a little more relaxed. I don't know.
And that's the other thing. And that's why I think regrets and like trying to revisionist history things and like this whole idea of like the butterfly effect and whatever is a great concept, like in aggregate, like for society. Like what if this would have happened and like Nikola Tesla invented all these things and the world went a different way? That's great. Don't do that with your own life. It's a very slippery slope.
Right.
Because every single thing that's happened is supposed to be the way it is right now. And if you get stuck in lamenting about that in any way, shape, or form for more than just like, I mean, look, we're all human, right? You'll have that moment where you're like, man, and it might sit with you for a week. You might be down or whatever, but you got to shake that off.
Yeah.
You got to move on.
When I'm having a good day, I always think about the fact that every single thing in my life that happened up until that day needed to happen the exact way it did at the exact time it did for me to be able to have that good day. And so that includes the things that were bad in my life that I didn't love, that caused me pain. Those needed to happen to get me to this place. So I guess at the end of the day, like things are the way that they are meant to be. And the best that we can do is choose to make the best out of those situations.
Hey, like 50 Cent said, sunny days wouldn't be so special if it wasn't for rain.
We're not quoting 50 anymore.
I'm sure he got it from
Did you hear
somewhere
what he
else.
said?
I have no idea.
So he basically said that black women are angry, and that's why he prefers exotic women.
He grew up in America. Why are you surprised?
I'm not surprised. I'm disappointed. Like, ew, shut your mouth. If you don't have anything, just shut up. Just shut. That's one of those things where I'm just like, you could have kept that to yourself. That forwarded no one. That helped no one.
I hate that.
So I say all that to say he's canceled on DRL. He's no longer brought up. I used to love 21 Questions. I sang that a lot. I'm done. He's canceled. I might not even watch Power anymore.
I hate to see somebody with so much to offer and so much resistance to everything that white supremacy means still be under the thumb of it. And it sucks. But yeah, I hear your point. It's terrible.
Yeah. So he's canceled.
You know, I do believe that there's a huge amount of resilience in people in general, but definitely in black folks. And we should continue to be great in whatever circumstances we are in. But at the same time, I do believe that people should make an effort to not have to have their offspring overcome more. They should really kind of do a man in the mirror thing and say, I know I had X, or I know I didn't have Y, or whatever, but everybody should want to love and nurture their children. And if there's anything out there that's dissuading you from it, please, it's never going to be more important than your children. And if you know somebody who's in that situation where, I don't know, it could be anything that's influencing them to not do that, please encourage people to see the beauty in being a father.
Or a mother.
And if you don't know how to do it, encourage them to call me up. Hit me up. I've definitely got some things that I could explain to people about the beauty of fatherhood, both from being a father, but also from even just observing one with, over almost 2 decades with a good friend of mine. Like, it's dope. Do it. Do it well. With whatever resources you have. There's people with nothing who do it. It's you don't have to check a bunch of boxes to be a dad. You just have to be there.
I love it. And thank you for being an amazing dad and being all that your children need and more.
Thank you. That's sweet.
And thanks for coming on DRL again.
No doubt.
Chris is always the guest where it's like, I have something on my heart I need to discuss with somebody. You sitting on that couch. Come sit in this one.
Right. It's all good. I love being on the show.
So where can people reach you?
I'm Chris Valentine on Facebook. If you're connected to Tennesha, you can find me. I think it's at CCINO360 at Instagram.
And please reach out to me at Tennesha Wood on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And until next time, wish me love. Hello again, my lovely listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of DRL. If you like the show, be sure to go on iTunes and leave a rating and also write a review. And don't forget to share with your friends and tell them all about DRL. Thank you so much for supporting.